The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
You are now logged into War Up on the WPIAL, featuring your hosts, Greg Warnock and Jeff Upson. PA Power Wrestling. Pennsylvania is wrestling.
Welcome into War Up on the WPIAL. Greg Warnock alongside Jeff Upson. The week that we always look forward to, the recapping of the WPIAL championships for AAA, but the preview of the state championships. Can't believe we got 1 week left to go.
It's hard to believe. Yeah, it really is. But really fun weekend. This past WPIAL tournament, 2018, was full of highs and lows and some things we didn't expect. So I was very thrilled with the performance.
Yeah, a couple of upsets early on there. There wasn't too many. The top four seeds pretty much garnered their way into the semifinals, and a lot of dominant performances, to be quite honest with you, in the first round. We talked about all the falls in AA. There were just as many in AAA in that first round. But overall, once we got into the semifinals, you got to those top four clear-cut people. At that point, that's when it got really stiff.
Yeah, and you saw that all the way out through the finals, where they really started to tighten up, especially through those more deep weights. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Mentioned the preliminary round where they had 112 matches. 70 of those were decided by fall or tech fall, 62.5%. It just seemed like the round just kept going fall, tech, and a lot of quick decisions were made by those wrestlers. But let's go ahead and get right into the action at 106 pounds. Your champion was Curtis Phipps of Norwin. He beats Alejandro Herrera of Seneca Valley 1-0, and he wins it on a penalty point. What did you think of that penalty point?
No, I mean, so from my vantage point, I was up top and during that sequence, and it looked like, well, yeah, he took him over his back, but he brought him down safely. And I talked to Curtis afterwards, and he said he wished that he would just not have had that call against him. He said, honestly, this is what he said in an interview. He's like, I wish it would have just went to overtime so I could get a takedown. In hindsight, though, I think it was the right call. And when I spoke with Mark Billett down on the floor, he was like, yeah, it was the right call, and you can't go against Coach Billett.
Yeah. No, never.
But yeah, I do.
To be honest with you, from my vantage point up top, it looked like it was the first one was a little bit rougher than the second one.
Yeah, I
guess it depends where he landed on his body.
Yeah, right. And it's your job as a top man to bring that person down safely. Right. Whether they land incorrectly or not, that's still on you to safely return that wrestler to the mat. So I understand it. And I don't think you ever want to see someone win on that, but it is what it is. I mean, let's not beat around it. Alejandro wrestled a really good match.
He had a great tournament. He dominated the match against Carter Dybert. He controlled the entire thing. He was never in any danger of losing that match. I think his top performance has gotten better as the season has gone on. I think he's just getting stronger and stronger.
I think his neutral is getting better and better. I mean, I think he's always been kind of tough on top, but his game from neutral has really improved. We saw that against Dybert, and you saw it against Phipps because he was in on a few shots. And I think this was good for Phipps to be pushed to the brink because, I mean, he stormed off the mat like he had lost. He's hungry, he's motivated. So this is only going to make him work a little bit harder. And I think you're going to see him come out firing on all cylinders come states, and same with Herrera Rondon. I think he's just been wrestling really tough.
I guess I should say top with some of the elite competition. I think that's where Herrera at times may have given a point or two, but now he's looking great and sharp.
Yeah.
His match against Dybert, though, definitely controlled the entire thing. Your top four in this weight class: Carter Dybert of Franklin Regional finishes in third. He beats Brady Sherback of Latrobe 3-1. I think going into this, you felt like you had a clear-cut top four going in. Jimmy Baxter, Cannon McMillan gets pinned in the opening round, and Nathan Crutelis of Thomas Jefferson. Mason Prinkney, the 6th seed, gets pinned by Jamie Cambron of Blackhawk. So you see in the 5 and the 6 go down. Noah Hunkel of Marzo wrestled very well as a 7 seed. He pushed Dybert, only lost to him 8-3, and really battled Sherback before losing 5-4. So he had a great tournament. But overall, I think the top 4 was right there at 106.
Yeah, I think Hunkley, he had a really good tournament. I was impressed with the way he wrestled, pinning Shriver and then giving Dybert all he could handle. But yeah, I think you always looked at this and said these top 4, it was just a matter of where they were going to finish, especially in that 2, 3, and 4. Brady Sherback, he loses to Dybert for the second week in a row. And, he just hasn't, he's there. He just, I don't know, he's got to wrestle better than he did at the WPIAL to get on the podium, that's for sure.
You look at the state bracket, Curtis Phipps is going to go in as the number 1 seed at 36-0. How do you like the spots for some of the WPIAL guys here?
Well, you got to like where Curtis Phipps is, and the way they do the seedings here, they take into account your points from last year, prestige points, they call them, for where you finished in the state. So he gets points for having finished in the top 8 last year, and also his winning percentage. So Curtis Phipps is your top seed, and I do like where he's at in the bracket. He could see, I think in that first round, either Peyton Brown or Liam Strauss. I think Brown's favored there, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Strauss come out with a win. Andrew Brest, though. Andrew Brest is a guy who lost in the Northwest Regional Finals to Matt Sarbo, but he's looked good this season. He has a win over Dybert as well, so I think he could cause some issues, but I really do like where Phipps is at on this side of the bracket. I think he has a clear shot to the finals, in my opinion.
Do you think Ben Mon poses any?
Well, yeah. I mean, clearly, if you're a regional champion, you're obviously going to pose an issue. But I think Ben Mon, I think Sherback is definitely going to get to the first round, and I think him and Mon are going to have a pretty good match to see where who comes out from there. Same with Matt Mayer from Bethlehem Catholic. I think he's going to he's sort of an unknown. He wrestled at 113 for most of the year for Becca, but he's down at 106. He beat out really tough Nate Lackman from Bethlehem Catholic, who is ranked as high as 3 during the season. So, yeah, that's sort of an unknown right there in that top half, but I do like where Phipps is at.
You look on the bottom half, Herrera and Dybert are there. How do you like their pass?
Well, they're a little bit tougher, in my opinion. I think Sherback has the easier route in that first round against Ranella from Meadville, and then having the winner and having Ben Mon. I think that's the better of the regional champs to have. Herrera, on the other hand, he's going to have Adam Jacob from East Pennsboro. This is a guy who's down to 106. He was at 113 most of the year, has some big wins, and we know how Herrera is just a little undersized. I mean, I do feel like he's grown into 106, but I do think Adam Jacob's going to pose sort of a tough match for him in that first round, so that is a tough first-round matchup. And same with Carter Dybert. He's going to get Kyle Hauserman from Council Rock North. He's the 5th out of the Southeast, but this is a guy who has 2 wins over Kyle Waterman, a guy that won the King of the Mountain where Dybert was 3rd. So you look at common opponents. I mean, I talked to head coach Matt Levy about this. Carter Dybert's a different wrestler now than he was in December when he wrestled at King of the Mountain. So, but it's still not a favorable draw for Carter because he's going to have to go through possibly as two Southeast Regional guys with Hauserman and Waterman, a guy who won the King of the Mountain.
Go down to 113 pounds for the WPIAL. Ryan Sullivan is your champion from Shaler. He defeats Frankie Benora of Moon 2-1. He had a much larger gap at the Allegheny County tournament, but Benora able to close that. Benora does defeat Jordan Waters of West Allegheny, a guy that they've been battling back and forth throughout the entire season. Benora winning majority of those matches, but he defeats him 3-1 in the semifinals. Waters finishes in 4th place. He loses in overtime 4-2 to Kyle Burkholder of Hempfield, who finishes in 3rd. And this one, same weight class, really your top 4 seemed like pretty clear cut going into it. You had Dylan Chappell, I thought had a great tournament from Seneca Valley. He beats Freddie Junko of North Allegheny 5-1. And then after losing to Benora, he beats Dom Giordano, Marino Angelicio, and then gives Kyle Burkholder a tough match in a Conci semi. So I thought Chappell had a great tournament, and Junko, who lost to Chappell, came all the way back to win 3 matches to get to the Conci semis before losing 1-0 to Waters. those two guys, great tournament, but the top four seemed like it was seemed pretty clear cut going in.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think you have 6 wrestlers here that are really tough. And Dylan Chappell and Freddie Junko, that first round, that was a good match. We thought it would be. And hats off to both Chappell and Junko for wrestling all the way back to the Conti semis. As you said, I think I was very impressed with the way Chappell wrestled throughout the weekend. Remember, this is a guy who started the year at 106 and had to go up to 113 because of Rondon. So, I mean, that's pretty significant in itself. But I agree with you. Benora closing that gap on Sullivan. So I don't look like that much of an idiot because I have Sullivan 1 and Benora 2 in the state. So I'm glad it closed up a little bit for my sake. But no, that was a good match. And Sullivan, I mean, he controlled that match still. I don't think he was ever in serious threat, but yeah, that was, and Benora just getting to the finals, I thought that was a question mark, especially after losing to Waters a few times this year. That was a good win for him in the semifinals.
Benora came out against Sullivan right after him, almost had a takedown near the edge of the mat. He gets that takedown. It's a totally different match. Yeah. But Sullivan able to fight it off. He gets his own takedown, and then, like you mentioned from there, definitely controlled the entire bout. You look at the state tournament, Sullivan will go in as the number 1 seed for the regional champions. How do you like his path to get to the finals?
Man, he's got it made in the shade. I think up on the top half. I think he, having been a state runner-up last year, and I got to talk to him a little bit after the match, and he said last year he kind of felt like he was flying on the radar. This year it's a little bit different, but he's ready for it. I think he makes the semifinals pretty easily, in my opinion. It's just a matter of who he's going to get in that semifinal match. So, I really do like where Sullivan landed on this bracket.
As far as on the bottom half, at the top half also, Jordan Waters is there as well. Bottom half, you have Frankie Benora and Kyle Burkholder.
Yeah, and that top half, Jordan Waters, I think he has a favorable matchup there with the Northwest third with Ben Tierpak from Cathedral Prep. I think he wins that match. And I think he gives Max Mendez from Council Rock South all he can handle. Max Mendez is a guy who's turning it on at the right time. He's won 2 really good matches against Luke Lucerine from Council Rock North. So I think Waters, though, I mean, he's going to pose some problems. He's a gamer. He's tough. So I like the way he's wrestling. Frank Benora, of all the guys, I think has the toughest draw. He has Killen Delaney from Westchester Henderson, returning state qualifier, 38-5 on the year. He's wrestled really tough all season, just in a really deep 113-pound bracket out of District 1. So Benora's going to have his hands full with Delaney.
And as far as Kyle Burkholder, he feeds essentially if he wins his first match against Zach Martin, he'll have to wrestle Will Betancourt.
Yeah, and it all depends on what Kyle Burkholder shows up here. If Burkholder, wrestles to his fullest potential, I think he beats Martin and then gives Betancourt a good match. But it depends if the Kyle Burkholder shows up that kind of goes through the motions. I think he could lose to Martin and have to battle back in the Conti. So I don't know. It all depends on which one shows up. But overall, I think the WPIAL is looking pretty good.
120 pounds, your champion Logan Macri from Canna McMillan. He defeats Louis Newell of Seneca Valley again, 4-3, but a much closer bout than it's been. It was the last time, I should say. Macri defeated Darren Miller in the semifinals 5-0. Newell defeated Henson 7-1. It seemed like there was a pretty clear-cut top 4 in this one, too, but then a surprise came. Tyler Kosak of Hampton, after losing to Louis Newell from Seneca Valley in the quarterfinals, battles back, defeats Miller for the second year in a row on the same move that he basically hit on the year ago. He defeats Miller 6-3 in the Conti semis. Wyatt Henson ends up pinning Kosak for third, but Miller is out. Kosak is in.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, because last year Miller still made it to the States. He lost to him in the championship round.
In the quarters.
The quarters, right? So he comes back and finishes top 4 and goes to States, and then finishes top 4 in States too. Right. But Tyler Kosak says not so fast. I mean, that was a huge win for him, and he was losing for 4 minutes and 35 seconds of that match, and he's able to get a big takedown to his back. Ends up winning that match, a huge match for him. He's always been on the fence sort of in the last 2 years, and I think last year he opened up a lot of eyes when he did beat Darren Miller, but no one remembers that. They remember Darren Miller winning and going on to States and placing at States. So huge win for him. As you said, we were expecting it to be at the top 4. Now I will say in this match, in this weight class, Louis Newell widened the gap against Wyatt Henson. closed the gap against Logan Macri. So Louis Newell did something really he had to make some adjustments because the match against Macri at the PIAA State Team Tournament, he was not in that match. Macri looked like he just owned Louis Newell in that match. This time around, and same with Louis Newell when he wrestled Wyatt Henson. It was a 1-0 or 2-1 match.
It was close.
It was really, really tight. This time around, Newell just took it to Henson and beats him 7-1 and then closes that gap on Macri. So despite Newell not winning here, he's got to feel good going into the state tournament.
Logan Macri gets the second seed. First seed is Doug Zaff of Downingtown West. Clearly, they don't take head-to-head into account when seeding these regionals since Macri's beaten Zaff already once this season. But Macri as the 2 seed, he's on the bottom half of the bracket. Henson and Newell are on the top half. Kosak on the bottom as well. Where do you think of the WPIAL here in this weight class?
I mean, this is just a loaded weight class, 120 pounds, and Logan Macri is just one of many guys here that are going to be in the hunt for a state title. And as you said, the PIAA does not take into account head-to-head matchups. Dougie Zapp, having won a state title a year previously, he has more prestigious points. You look at Logan Macri, and him, obviously, he has a win over Dougie Zapp this year, but that does not take into account when you look at the PIAA seedings. Their criteria is only on winning percentage and your performance last year. Doug Zapp was a state champion last year. He gets 100 points, so he's automatically up there on that top half. Now, you look at where Logan's at in the bracket, he's really in a
bad spot.
A bad spot. Yeah, I mean, I hate to beat around the bush about it, but he's not in a good spot. Brandon Meredith from Springford, who has a win over Newell as well. He beat Newell this year at the team tournament. He's going to Penn State. He's a really good wrestler, and he placed at States the same year that Logan Macri did not place at States 2 years ago. Macri's going to most likely get Meredith in that first round. Now, then it gets easier after that. So the first round is going to be tough, but then he's going to have the winner of Rafael Pertilla and Matt Leon. I think he has no problem beating either one of those. But that top half, Sean Pearson has a win over Macri this year. Pearson beat him at the Cumberland Valley Kickoff. That was when they were both up at 126, but still a significant win.
Yeah, and then you look at Louis Newell on the top half. He's going to get J.J. Wilson of Cedar Cliff likely in the quarterfinals before, if winning that match, getting Doug Zaff.
Yeah, and that's a match that Louis Newell has already won. He beat J.J. Wilson at Powerade. So I really like where Louis Newell's at in this bracket because I think he beats Panero Johnson, and I think and I'm not even convinced it's going to be J.J. Wilson. Brandon Cassis from Parkland, he has a win over Jarrett Lane from Southern Columbia, state champion. So Cassis is a guy who is kind of, I wouldn't say under the radar because a lot of people know his name, but he's not a regional champion. So I think that Cassis-Wilson first-round match is going to be a really tough one, and I think Newell's going to beat either one of them because I think he already beat J.J. Wilson. I think he's a little bit more consistent than Cassis, so he actually has a pretty decent draw.
Yeah, and then from there on the other half as well, Henson's going to get Enriquez.
Yeah, and Henson, I don't know if you remember this one or not, Greg, but Henson and Enriquez wrestled at Powerade, and it wasn't pretty. Enriquez pretty much beat him soundly in that match. It was very early on in that match because neither one of them were seeded. But they're both different wrestlers now. Enriquez had some setbacks, and Henson's been wrestling tough. So Enriquez is a guy who was a state medalist last year. He took Sammy Hilligus to overtime. He was almost a state finalist. So, based on past results, you got to say Henson's got a tough draw, but anything's possible.
126 pounds, Sam Hilligus of North Hills dominant as he gets 4 falls to win the championship. He pins Caleb Morris of Waynesburg in the finals. Morris, a 2-time WPIAL champion coming in. Morris defeated Jacob Ely of Hopewell in the semifinals. Ely ends up finishing in 4th place. He had a wild one with Gabe Willishow of Latrobe, but Willishow finishes in 3rd.
Yeah, and you look at that, Sammy Hilligus, my gosh, that gap that he has between the rest of the field is widening. He looks stronger. I mean, he looks so much different than he did at Powerade. He actually looks like a 126-pounder. He looks stronger, faster, more dominant from his top. I mean, he's punishing people from top and good wrestlers. I mean, Caleb Morris is a guy who's won this tournament twice, and Hilligus was just kind of tossing him around.
I think it was 8-0 when he pinned him.
Right. So Hilligus, yeah, he's for real. Caleb Morris, he did what Caleb Morris does. He's consistent. He grinds out wins to get to the finals. And as you said, Gabe Willishell, that match with Ely was, I don't know if you watched that third place match. That was a fun match to watch.
You know, a lot of them are with Willishell, though.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Willishell just, you know, and Mark Bill and I had many conversations about the way Gabe Willishell, he just goes for broke a lot of times. He doesn't do necessarily everything the coach wants him to, but he finds a way to get a lot of points and score points and find wins. So it was good to see Gabe get to the state tournament.
You had those top four. The consolations were actually pretty interesting as far as results go. Jason Geyer beats Kenny Heyman. Jacob Downing defeats Mason Franks, a guy who was talked about in this top four. Zach McCann then beats Jacob Downing. Geyer beats Logan Saliga. So it was a lot of interesting results in his consolations, but they weren't just quite there with the top four.
Right, and you look at Mason Franks, and he's banged up. I mean, I'm surprised he even went based on the injury he sustained to his shoulder. So, you know, I wasn't surprised after seeing him how he was physically in his condition that he lost to Willishell and then dropped it. But yeah, I thought Zach McCann wrestled really, really tough. He wrestled Downing. He really was right there with him the whole time, and then just turned it on. And Ely as well. He was right there with him. So. Yeah, Jason Geyer as well. We said it before, these Seneca Valley wrestlers, maybe going to that state team tournament gave them some extra motivation or, you know, some of that extra competition that really helped them because they've all looked really good. And Geyer beats Kenny Heyman 3-1 in sudden victory and then pins Logan Saliga. And he gave Willishell all he could handle in a 6-0 match.
And you know what? Seneca Valley had a lot of guys that were in that top six blood round before potentially moving on. I know they fell short on a number of those matches, but they were battling throughout the entire tournament. So you got to give those guys a lot of credit. You look at 126 pounds in the state. Sam Hilligus is your number one seed, as expected, as a returning state champion. He's likely to have Dalton Rohrbaugh in the quarterfinals. Yeah, I mean, but I mean, the way that Sammy's wrestling right now, I don't want to be drawing him early on. So, I mean, yeah, Rohrbaugh's, I mean, he's a guy who was third at states at one time a couple years back. He's a very talented wrestler. He's going to Lock Haven. He's been to a lot of all-season tournaments. These guys have, they've seen each other at different tournaments before, but Sammy Hilligus is still looking pretty good. Rohrbaugh, it most likely will be in that first quarterfinal matchup, but yeah, I think he's poised. Jacob Ely also in the top half. In the bottom half, Caleb Morris of Waynesburg, as well as Gabe Willishell of Latrobe. Willishell, if he wins his first match, will get Ed Scott to Du Bois. Yeah, so that first match he has with Connor Quinn of Owen J. Roberts, that's a tough match. Connor Quinn's a really accomplished wrestler. He was a national prep qualifier last year when he was at Malvern Prep. And, one of the guys I like his draw is Jacob Ely from Hopewell. He's got Nick Toole from Mechanicsburg, but that's a match that I think can go either way. And if he can battle Kenny Herman and drop down and get a few wins, he could be in a good position. But Caleb Morris, I think, has one of the tougher draws because he's going to have Jagger Condomiti from Northampton, who's a freshman, but really, really stout freshman. And if you haven't noticed, Morris, he does not fare well at Hershey. And that's something that's been true the last 3 years. So if he wants to change, the way he's wrestling, this is the time to do it. Yeah, he's got his last shot here coming up. 132 pounds, Colton Camacho of Franklin Regional once again meets with Nick Coy of Penn Trafford. Matt Levy, head coach of Franklin Regional, mentioned that these are always 3-2 type score matches, always close. They go to overtime this time. Camacho wins 5-3 at the second overtime period. Your third place winner was Garrett Reinsfelder of Shaler. He defeated Zach Macy of Chartiers Valley 7-1. Macy ends up knocking off Luca Augustine of Waynesburg. He beats him in the ultimate tiebreaker to get to the finals. So a good performance by Macy to get to Hershey.
Yeah, so I think the top two here are just head and shoulders ahead of the rest of the field. I mean, these top two are significantly better than the 3 and 4, in my opinion.
I agree with that.
Colton Camacho and Nick Coy, these guys, they know each other pretty well. They've practiced together, young guns. They're pretty familiar with each other, and they've wrestled multiple times this year. So I wasn't surprised to see it come down to the wire. I mean, I was a little surprised that it came down that close, but Nick Coy's, I mean, he's tough. He's a really good wrestler, and he's gotten much better, I think, over this last year. So, I mean, just look what he did to Reinsfelder. I mean, 8-0, and he could have made that even worse. So, yeah, these two are definitely a little bit higher up and head of these other two. Zach Macy had a good tournament, but he got pinned by Nick Coy in under a minute. Right. Although he did have some really good wins in that Conci round, and that match with Luke Augustine, man, that was a grudge. That was a grudge fest, man. Those guys they left it all on the mat, and
you got those points late to tie it up, force overtime.
Yeah. So, and same with Garrett Reinsfelder. I mean, it was good for him, but overall, these top two, they're the real deal.
You look at 132, Colton Camacho gets the number 3 seed in this one. He's on the bottom half of the bracket. Nick Coy and Garrett Reinsfelder in the top, Camacho in the bottom with Macy.
Yeah, and you look at this and Camacho's got a tough draw here because he's going to have the winner between Caden Moreno and Ryan O'Grady. Both these wrestlers are very tough. Caden Moreno from Unionville. He transferred late in the year from McDonough School in Maryland to Unionville back home. So he's from Unionville, wrestled at McDonough School for the last 3 years. It was a 2-time national prep medalist, and he's the third place finisher out of the Southeast. He's going to go against Ryan O'Grady, who is a state qualifier. He's going to Princeton to wrestle. He's a very, very sound wrestler. So either one of those wrestlers is going to be tough for Camacho, but I do believe it gets easier after that because he has a winner of Andrew Stark and Michael Cassidy, which I don't think he's going to have an issue with. So his toughest match may be that first round match.
Yeah, and then potentially Patrick Gold of East Stroudsburg South in the semifinals from there. On the top half, you have Nick Coy. If he can win his first match, he'll get the top seed, Andrew Wart of Central Dauphin.
Yeah, and Nick Coy's got a tough draw there as well with Jonathan Mears from Easton, a guy who's been ranked as high as number 3 in the state. He's a very, very tough sophomore from Easton. I believe that he's that's going to be a tough first-round matchup. And then whoever wins that's going to most likely get Andrew Wirt, who's a 2-time state medalist. So tough draw for the WPIAL here.
138 pounds, your champion from Kiski, Noah Levitt. He wins by injury default over Jackson Henson of Waynesburg. Henson avenges his loss from the week prior to Tim Ritzko. He beats him 3-1 in overtime. Henson ends up injury defaulting due to a knee injury, but according to Joe Throckmorton, he should be fine for states, but they just wanted to be precaution for going into this. As far as your third place finisher, it was Ty Linsenbigler of Hempfield. He defeats Tim Ritzko of Cannon McMillan 7-2. And Linsenbigler had a tough 1-0 draw against Waynesburg's Jackson Henson. So we talked about the top 3 in this weight class. Linsenbigler kind of went under the radar a little bit, came in as the 6th seed, but he had a great tournament and finished 3rd.
Yeah, I mean, I think Linsenbigler, I think he's definitely a stout freshman. I mean, he's battle tested. He's won PJW championships, and we saw what he did against Jackson Henson. That was a tough 1-0 defeat that he had to him, and for him to come back and beat Tim Ritzko like he did, a guy who had beaten Jackson Henson a week prior, that was a really good win for him as a freshman. So, this is a really interesting weight because Noah Levitt wins his first WPIAL title without having to wrestle a second on the mat. But Jackson Henson pretty much, he's owned that match against Levitt this year so far. So, I think he caught a break here not having to wrestle Henson in that finals.
Do you think he deserved it since he had to wrestle Spencer Lee the last 2 years?
I guess you could say, well, here's your award for having to wrestle Spencer Lee in the finals the last 2 years. You can have your WPIAL championship on a silver platter. But it's definitely nice when you look at the seedings for the state tournament that it helps him out. But the top 4 here are, I think, all solid.
All solid guys. I hope they can all be healthy. I know that Henson ends up injury defaulting out, but Levitt seemed like he was a little banged up in his matches. Even Ritzko too. He didn't seem like he was 100% in his matches, which a lot of these guys this time of year aren't. But those 3 guys especially, all 3 of them battling all the way into the deep into the team tournament. So those guys were the guys that they were relying on, wrestling each other, right?
Yeah,
Levitt and Ritzko Henson.
All back to back.
And so having that constant battle, I'm sure it's a lot of wear and tear on those guys. So I think the biggest thing, especially for the WPIAL, because you want to see them all get on the medal stand, is they hopefully get healthy by Hershey here this upcoming week, which it's tough to do in such a short turnaround. Noah Levitt gets the number 3 seed in the state bracket. He's on the bottom half with Ryan Anderson of Bethlehem Catholic.
Yeah, so you look at the draws here, and this is This is 138's a kind of a wide open weight class here, I would, in my opinion, outside of Ryan Anderson. So you look at Ryan Anderson as the favorite, but Seth Colino from Baldigo area, he's a state medalist last year. He comes in unblemished, 34-0. I like the way he's been wrestling. He's just been really consistent out of Baldigo area. But Jackson Henson draws Zach Ortman in the first round. Zach Ortman's a guy who beat Luke Hemmer twice last year at the state tournament. He hasn't had quite the year that many were expecting, being a returning state medalist. So I think Henson wins that match and then really sets up a huge matchup with Seth Colino.
Yeah, and then on the Ty Linsenbigler, he gets on the top half as well.
Yeah, and Ty Linsenberger there going against Nick Lilly. That's a guy he wrestled previously at Powerade. He wrestled him at Powerade and beat him 1-0. So, I mean, you got to like that draw. That's not an easy draw, but I'd rather be going against a guy I beat than a guy I haven't.
And Levitt, he should have a good chance to get to the semis.
Yeah, I agree. I think he does. I think regardless of who comes out of a Colton Jumper and Michael McKinney, I think Levitt will win that match, and I like his chances against Ciotti or Woolshan. So I think Levitt, having won this was huge for him, have that WPIAL title, because I really think he's got the easiest route to the semifinals.
And then on the bottom half, you get Tim Ritzko. If he gets his first one, he's going to have Ryan Anderson right out of the bat.
Yeah, and he's got a tough first-round matchup with Nathan Schwartz from Hollidaysburg, a returning two-time state qualifier. Ryan Anderson waiting in the wings there. So, yeah, not a good draw for Ritzko.
145 pounds, Cam Connor and Joe Chisco wrestle once again in the finals, and Cam Connor avenges that loss from a week ago. He defeats Chisco 2-1. Both guys look solid in the semifinals. Chisco beating Alex Hornfeck of Mars 4-0. Connor defeating Nick Acuna 2-0 from Moon. Both guys wrestle strong on top to get those wins. In the bottom half, Alex Hornfeck of Mars gets his third place finish. He defeats Nick Acuna of Moon 5-0 to finish third.
Yeah, and I think Hornfeck is the guy here who really impressed me the most, because we knew what to expect out of Chisco and Connor. But Hornfeck is a guy who, he's been highly touted before in the WPIAL, but he hasn't come through. This year, he really impressed me. He beats Tanner Rohaley, a tough Tanner Rohaley, 6-2. But then he avenges that loss to Nick Acuna. He lost to him in sudden victory earlier this year, comes back and beats him 5-0. Very convincing win. So really impressed with the way Hornfeck wrestled. But as you said, Connor and Chisco, those two wrestled so many times this year, back and forth. So it was good to see Connor come back and get that win for him.
State bracket, 145 pounds. Sam Sasso is the story here. He is the top seed. Cam Connor in the same half as him in the top half.
Yeah, so you look at Cam Connor, and he's going to draw either Michael Kistler or Connor Finke. Not really sure who comes out of there. I think, Finke may be a little bit favored. But his the quarterfinal would most likely be against Ryan Vulock from Pope John Paul. And he was a Southeast first place. He was a medalist 2 years ago as a freshman. And, we saw him at Powerade, finished pretty high on the podium there. So Cam Connor has a tough draw, because not only does he have Vulock, but as you said, he has Sammy Sasso.
Yeah, very tough draw. And in addition to that, Nick Acuna, if he gets his win in the opening match, he's going to have Sam Sasso in that opening round. Alex Hornfeck, Mars, and Job Chisco, Penn Trafford, both on the bottom half.
And I think I like where Hornfeck sits. He's got Cole Handlovic in the first match, but I think that's a match that he can win. I think that's a match that he can, if he wrestles like he did at the WPIAL tournament, I think he does win that match. And then he would have the winner of Micah Hoffman or Nick Barnhart or Joey Stoke. Another match that I think he's in that match. I'd much rather be down there than near Ryan Vulock or Sammy Sasso. So I really do like where Hornfeck is, and same with Chisco. Chisco, I think he's gonna beat Roman Moser, and then he could most likely have a rematch with Kobe Ho from Du Bois, who he lost to at Powerade, but these two kind of go back and back. They both train at Young Guns. They go back and forth. So, I'd much rather be on the bottom half than the top half.
Anywhere that's away from Sasso, I think, is where you want to be.
Sure.
In the bracket. 152 pounds, the deepest weight class in the WPIAL. Luke Kemmerer coming up from 145 made it even deeper. And it did not go as the seeds planned. I think the only bracket that didn't is the best way to explain it. Jack Blumer of Kiski is your champion. He was the number 4 seed going in. He beats Brock Godson of Bell Vernon 7-4, and then he avenges the loss from last week to Kemmerer. He beats him 4-2, and then he defeats Cole Spencer of Pine Richland in the final 6-3. Spencer coming in as the 6th seed. He beats Trey Howard of Waynesburg 4-2, and then he beats Ty McGeary of West Allegheny 5-3 in overtime to get to the final to wrestle Blumer. Down into the consolations, it was really a top 6 in this weight class, 6 deep, and 6 guys who could probably medal in the PIAAs. Trey Howard and Luke Kemmerer wrestle one another. Kemmerer was pushed to overtime, almost doesn't even make the state tournament, but he beats Howard 3-1 in overtime. Ty McGeary knocks off Brock Godson, a returning state medalist, 2-1, so Godson doesn't make the state tournament, and then Kemmerer beats McGeary 3-0 for 3rd place. But boy, what a deep weight.
This was a crazy weight, and I don't think many people had it laid out this way. Yeah, especially, Blumer and Spencer, both in the finals. I mean, that's definitely a surprise to many people, but there's so much to say here because, Jack Blumer beats Brock Godson, a guy who was 5th in the state last year, really, really tough wrestler, close to making the state semifinals and finals. And, I think Brock he's been banged up all year. I think he's got some things he's handling, and I wasn't, necessarily super shocked to see Blumer come out and beat him because Blumer is obviously very tough. But then for Jack to come out and avenge that loss to Luke Kemmerer, a guy who was, highly ranked, number 1 in the state. So Godson was number 2. So not only did Blumer take out the number 2 guy, but he took out the number 1 guy. And then the Kiski guys started talking. And then it's like, I couldn't tell you how many Kiski people walked up to me and said, "Are you going to rank Blumer higher now?" I'm like, okay, calm down. He likes the underdog role, though, right? He does. I mean, you might want to keep him down one more week just to. Okay. All right. Well, yeah. I think he relishes that, though. I heard him talking. I think that, hey, you knocked off a number 1, number 2. He's like, yeah, I think I'm like number 10. Like, to him, it was just like, hey, I'm enjoying this. Yeah, knocking off a guy like Luca Frenzy in the state tournament and then beating Brock Godson and Luke Kemmerer. I think he loves that opportunity to continue to knock people off. Sure. And the guy he wrestled in the finals, he looked really good in the finals. Jack Blumer looked just consistent throughout the tournament. And Cole Spencer, a freshman who I'm very high on. So you got a sophomore and a freshman here. And you get a senior, Luke Kemmerer, coming in 3rd. And as you said, Trey Howard, a guy who's owned Jack Blumer. He's beaten him in all the times they've wrestled this year. And he's not going to the state tournament. So it really shows how if you have the hot hand, how it pays off, because Blumer had the hot hand and it paid out for him because he's able to come away and get a championship in a really deep weight class. As you said, 6 guys here I think could all medal at the state tournament. That's how deep it is. You look at the state tournament, you have 6 guys, very talented guys, but they get the worst seed out of the 5. Jack Blumer gets the number 5 seed here in the state tournament. Yeah, and I, to be honest, I'm not surprised by this because the prestige points. He's not been to a state tournament. He hasn't placed in the region, and he's got 7 losses on the year. So Gage McClanahan from Baldigo area is a returning state medalist. Despite the fact that Blumer beat Frenzy head-to-head this year, Frenzy was a state qualifier last year. So that helps him in that sense. And Clayton Ulrey from Lower Dolphin, also a guy who was a state qualifier a year ago, and same with Dan Mancini. So, I'm not surprised by that Blumer was put here, but at the same time, you have to like where you're at in the bracket, knowing the fact that the guy who was the other regional champion in your side is a guy you pinned. Now, obviously, that was a really interesting match. He's given up a leg. He goes in to fight hands off his foot and ends up knocking heads, and he does end up pinning Frenzy, but I don't think it was a fluke. And I think, Blumer's got to feel pretty good about where he's at in the bracket. How do you like where the rest of the guys are for the WPIAL? Well, you look at where they fall, and Luke Kemmerer, I think it has to be despite the fact that he had some setbacks and he finished 3rd and almost did not make the state tournament. We've seen guys bounce back. I like where he's at in the bracket with Jake Brenzii from Chambersburg and then Dan Mancini. So if there is a regional champion I'm going to face, it's probably going to be Mancini, even though he's a guy who has a win over Gage McClanahan. Kind of, all over the place. He has 4 losses, but he's had some good wins and some good losses. So he's been exposed this year. But where he's at, where's Kemmer's on the bracket, I think I like it. And you have to look at the Northeast region. The guy who came in ranked number 1 in the state, William Evensky from Scranton, he got upset by a freshman, Lenny Pinto, who Blumer pinned at the POWRade tournament. So, I gotta feel confident with some of these WPIAL guys and where they fall in the bracket here. You're going to have Cole Spencer and Lenny Pinto, 2 freshmen, going at it right out of the gate.
Speaking of 152 pounds, we're delighted to be joined by the champion, Jack Blumer of Kiski area. Jack, thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first and foremost, congratulations on your win. Talk a little bit about this bracket and your performance throughout the entire weekend. We were talking about how it was arguably the deepest weight class going into it. What were your thoughts heading in as a number 4 seed, being on the top half with guys like Brock Godson and Luke Kemmerer?
It was kind of nerve-wracking at first, but I saw it, and I've beaten Brock before, so I knew that one would be another close one, but I was excited for that one. But I wanted that another shot at Kemmerer.
What did you learn from the match in sections that you used to be able to beat him in the semifinals?
My coaches saw things that he was good at and what he wasn't good at, and we went into the room and worked them all week.
As far as your performance in that match itself, I know you mentioned Chris Heater saw some things and then you were able to apply those things. Was it pretty much exactly what they drew up for you, or did you have to improvise a little bit?
It was pretty much what they said. They said keep it close and then just look for late scrambles and try to come out on top.
And, Jack, when you look at it and you had such a good quarterfinal and semifinal performance beating Brock Godson and Luke Kemmerer, and it's easy to lose sight of the fact that you still had, despite the fact that you won those 2 big matches, you still had a really big test in the finals with Cole Spencer, a guy who beat Trey Howard, who I know you've had some troubles with in this year. Cole Spencer's a freshman, so you got a sophomore and a freshman in the finals here. How did you feel going in against a guy who, did you know much about him?
Nah, I've never heard anything about that kid this whole season. I just knew of his name, but that whole freshman versus sophomore thing, I didn't want a freshman to beat me.
Yeah, I'm sure being a sophomore and you've been in that position before, and it's just interesting because, as you said, you didn't really have a whole lot of common opponents this year, so it's kind of tough to gauge. And I think a lot of people were surprised to see Spencer come out through the bottom half, especially with Trey Howard there and Ty McGeary. But you had to be happy with your performance in the finals, that you didn't let those 2 big wins in the quarterfinals and the semifinals, you didn't lose sight of the ultimate goal, and that was to get a WPIAL championship.
Yeah, I just kept telling my coaches one more after each match.
And you obviously came away with the title, and it was for you obviously a big success. But you also had success from your teammates as well. Seeing Noah Levitt win a title, seeing Cam Connor win a title. When they won theirs, was it just like the extra motivation, like I can't be the one that lets them down?
Yeah, I was 100% saying I cannot be the one to lose in the finals, or I would be dealing with that all practice this week.
You mean they rub it in?
Yeah, they would.
Well, to be fair, Jack, Noah, you didn't watch Noah win one because he just got it handed to him, right? So I hope you have that come back to him. So you went out and earned it, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about that Kiski, pride and tradition, you guys all wear the team shirts, and we've had multiple of your coaches and your teammates on the show before. I'm sure you've listened in to before, and we always harp in on how strong that tradition is. Your brother being a very successful wrestler, who we said now as a sophomore, you are a little bit ahead of where he was, and look at where he's at. So that's got to be a good feeling for you to be in chasing Joey, chasing him down.
Yeah. I just have a lot of thanks to give to Joey, because no matter what, he'll never admit that I'm better than him, but he'll admit that I'm doing really good, and he even helps me. And I'm pretty sure he was more excited than me when I won that title.
I bet he was. And, that's just a big brother type thing. He's never going to admit you're better than him because, he's a big brother, right? So,
that's how it works.
Him giving you, kudos and being excited is really good.
Yeah.
And you obviously had him in the house. I've seen that he was there for the championships. Was it nice having him there as a support for you?
Yeah, he solely wanted to come back just to watch me wrestle those Tuesdays. So he had my parents come pick him up the whole way to Penn State just to drive to watch me. Will
he be in Hershey for you?
He said he's going to try to do everything he can to be there.
That's awesome. Good. I hope he does, and I hope he's there to give you some support because he's been there before. Talking about Hershey, you've been there before with the team, but this is going to be your first time there as an individual. I know you and I talked about this after the finals, and you said you're a little nervous because you haven't been there before, and before you had your teammates to rely on, and now it's just me, it's just Jack Blumer who has to go out there and perform. Do you feel a little bit more confident now, being that it's Monday and you're just a few more days away?
Yeah, I'm getting a little more confident, but I feel like when the day comes, I'll be nervous for that first round and just to get all the nerves out in that first match.
Well, yeah, and as you look at your bracket, I know you've probably looked at the bracket a few times, and you might have seen some corrections, and there was some you got moved around a little bit because Luca Frenzy, guy who you wrestled in the team tournament, he wasn't given his prestige points for having been in the state tournament last year, so the brackets got bumped around a little bit. Is that something that you look at and does that stress you out and you're trying to figure out where you are in the bracket, and is that something you worry about, or is that just kind of you just got to show up and wrestle?
Yeah, I just got to show up and wrestle. I think this bracket, anyone can win this bracket. It's wide open. There's no dominant wrestle that will come out on top.
Yeah, and Jack, I 100% agree with you there. I don't think there's a clear-cut favorite here, and I think, obviously if you wrestle the way you did at the WPIAL championship, I think it's anybody's. It's definitely within reach. And you look at some of the guys in the bracket, you've got some familiar opponents here. You look at Luca Frenzy, a guy who you wrestled at the team tournament and kind of got in that funky situation where he's trying to get a takedown. He has a single leg elevated up, and you go in to fight hands and then end up bumping heads, and then you end up getting a huge fall, 6 points for the team. Is that a match that you're looking back on and saying, hey, that's I gotta wrestle even better than I did before to get that win?
Yeah, I feel like if I end up wrestling him, he'll want some blood. So
yeah, go ahead.
I feel like me and him it'll be a different match if we wrestle again than that day.
And another guy here that I'm looking at that you wrestled is Lenny Pinto from Stroudsburg, a guy you wrestled at the Powerade tournament. And this was one I remember I circled to watch, and I did watch this at Powerade, and you really took it to him. You're so tough with that half Nelson. It's just so tight, and you're able to defeat Lenny Pinto. He's a guy who beat William Evensky from Scranton, who was number one in the state prior to this tournament. So, as you said, the bracket's just busted. You busted it. Lenny Pinto busted it. All these guys that just kind of came in here and said, we don't care what the rankings say, or we're just going to come in and do our thing. So that's got to give you confidence knowing, hey, you beat some of these top guys that are in the bracket.
Yeah. It's just filled with tough wrestlers the whole way through, and it's just anyone's game to win it.
Well, Jack, I know the coaches gave Jeff some trouble about where you were at in the rankings. How do you feel about it? Do you like being the underdog? That's my opinion. I think you like the underdog approach.
I like wherever he decides to put me.
That's a good answer, Jack. I like that.
It's fine by me. It doesn't bother me where I'm at.
As long as after next week you're at number one, right?
Yeah, that would be very nice.
And I know you talked about having those nerves, but having guys that have been to the state tournament before, you have Noah Levitt who's making his fourth trip there. You got Cam Connors making his second, Isaac Reed. That's got to feel pretty good for you knowing that you're not going alone. You're going with some teammates that have all been to Hershey before. So, are you really leaning on their experience these next few days?
Yeah, they've given me a lot of advice on what to feel, what to do, what to get ready and stuff. He said And it's great having those two in the room with me and like as my partners. Like it helps me and Nick out a lot.
Well, Jack, we appreciate your time on the show with us. Congratulations again on your WPIAL championship, and best of luck as you head to Hershey this week.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Looking forward to seeing you out there.
Thank you for having me.
No problem.
Thanks again to Jack Blumer of Kiski for joining us on the show. He's just a lot of fun to watch wrestle, and he's an excitable guy. He's just great to talk to.
Yeah, I mean, he reminds me of his brother so much. You know, I mean, they just, not only do they look similar, but they just wrestle similar. They're so tough on top. They're kind of long, a little bit, you know, kind of flexible, and they just kind of do whatever they want to out there. And, yeah, it's going to be fun to see Jack go out there in states. I mean, really, he said it. It's a wide open bracket.
It really is, and it should be a lot of fun to see how it plays out, just like the WPIALs were this past week. For sure. 160-pound Zach Hartman of Bell Vernon, 3 falls to get to the finals before beating Garrett Ninehouse of Cannon McMillan for yet another time this season. He beats him 3-1. Ninehouse beats Luke Stout another time again this season. He beats him 5-1. Nick Delp ends up finishing in third place by injury default over Luke Stout. Again, pretty clear-cut top 4, I thought, here at this weight class. John Hoover of North Allegheny made some noise, but Delp able to beat him 1-0 to get into that third-place match. But Stout ended up injuring default. I guess he had some kind of allergic reaction.
Yeah.
Should be okay for state tournament, but they just precautionary wanted to keep him out.
Yeah, so this was after his semifinal match, I believe it was, or after his Conci semifinal match. He had some type of allergic reaction where his face was swelling up. So precautionary, they held him out of that for good reason. Zach Hartman, as you said, just really dominated his WPIAL championship here, and it was a closer score, 3-1 against Garrett Ninehouse, but I mean, these guys have wrestled 4 times in the last 2 years, 3 times in the last year. So these guys are close. They know each other really well. This is a number 2 versus number 3. So you better believe it's going to be close, right? So,
right.
But I was really impressed with the way he wrestled. Nick Delp as well. John Hoover was right there with Nick Delp. I don't know if you watched that Conci match, that blood round match, the best round in wrestling, in my opinion. That was a really tough match with Nick Delp and John Hoover, and Delp was able to come away with that victory to secure his spot at the state tournament.
You look at the state tournament itself, Carter Starocki gets the number 1 seed from Cathedral Prep. Zach Hartman of Bell Vernon, he is your number 2. So you have Garrett Ninehouse at the top half. He's going to potentially wrestle Starocki in the semifinals if he wants to get to that final. Nick Delp will see Starocki in the quarterfinals if he can get his win. And then also on the bottom half with Hartman is Luke Stout.
Yeah, so I really like where Zach Hartman's at. I think he's got a pretty much clear shot to the semifinals. Being on that bottom half away from Carter Starocki and Garrett Ninehouse is a really good place to be. So Hartman's got to be feeling good about where he's at on the bracket. I really think he's in a favorable matchup. Same with Luke Stout. I think Luke Stout's in a good area. I think he could. I think if there's anyone who's going to beat A.J. Wilson, the top seed or top wrestler out of South Central, I think it is Luke Stout and Garrett Ninehouse as well. I think we could have three WPIAL wrestlers in the semifinals here. I really do.
Yeah, it's a really deep weight for the WPIAL overall, and even Nick Delp, I think he can make some noise and get to the medal stand. 170 pounds for the WPIAL. Scott Joel had a great tournament for Bell Vernon. He beats Jason Montgomery 7-2 in the semifinals in yet another rematch, and then he knocks off Kyle Hammond of Waynesburg 8-6 to win the title. Montgomery did finish in third place. He won by 10-2 major decision over Jesse Quatsi of Greensburg-Salem.
Yeah, and Scott Joel, I mean, from that sophomore to junior year, he's the most improved wrestler in my opinion. As a sophomore, he never looked like he was capable of picking up those big wins. This year, he's expected to pick up those big wins. I mean, the way he wrestled at Powerade, the way he's been wrestling all season, really, I'm very impressed with the way Scott's been wrestling. He lost to Montgomery the week prior, comes back in a strong win, 7-2, but doesn't stop there. He beats Kyle Hammond as well, 8-6 in a really tight match. So, Scott Joel's got to be feeling good. He's peaking at the right time. And again, this is a weight class where all 3 of these guys, I think, can get on the medal stand. Montgomery's a guy who was already on the medal stand last year. So that just shows you where they're at.
Tough draw for Joel as far as seeding purposes because he hasn't had much of an impact on the state level. Trent Hidley at the top and Scott Joel right there in the top half with him as a number 4 seed. Could run into him if he can get to the semifinals.
Yeah, so I mean, Scott Joel, being the fact that this is his first state tournament, clearly, he doesn't pick up those prestige points like Cade Wilson does and Luke Nichter does. So if you're looking at it finishing top 5 here, he's still in a good position because I think he can make the semifinals, which would guarantee him a spot on the podium. Trent Hidley, obviously, we know what he's about. We know he's on the top. And Quatsi, even if he wins his first match, he feeds right into him. So not a good draw for him. But Scott Joel, I mean, if he makes it to the semifinals, I think that's a good draw for him on that top half. Montgomery, on the other hand, I think he's going to feed into Cade Wilson. Cade Wilson's just really, really tough the way he's been wrestling. And Kyle Hammett, I think he could feed into Luke Nichter, and I think that could be a good match. So really, although the bottom half is away from Hidley, Scott Joel, I think, has a clearer path to the semifinals, in my opinion.
Yeah, because there's 3 big wrestlers in addition to Hidley. You have Cade Wilson and Luke Nichter. So you have those three plus addition of the 3 studs from the WPIAL. 182 pounds, probably the biggest upset in the finals, comes here as Christian Saquette of Butler. First, he pins Justin Hart of Hampton in the semifinals to get to the final, and then he beats Tim Wallace of Albert Gallatin, a guy looking for his 3rd WPIAL championship. He beats him 9-2. Wallace finishing in 2nd place. The 3rd place finisher was Max Shaw from Thomas Jefferson. He beats Justin Hart 5-2. Hart had a tough one in the Constellation semifinals, beating Noah Seaberger from Bethel Park 3-2 in the ultimate tiebreaker. But back to Saquette and Wallace. Really what this match came down to was Wallace tries to hit a throw, ill-advised, I would say. Tries to hit a throw in the first period. He gets put on his back, so he goes down 4-0 early. Hits a quick reversal. They're not calling any kind of stalling calls on Saquette. He pretty much laid there the entire second period. Wallace tried to turn him again in the 3rd. No stalling calls on Saquette, so he has to lit him up. And then he tries another toss. It doesn't work out, and that's why he ends up losing 9-2. But boy, the officiating. Now Wallace had to try the desperation toss in the 3rd. Desperation toss, the toss in the first, ill-advised. But there should have been some kind of stalling calls to get Saquette moving so Wallace didn't have to resort to that throw.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. Saquette, I mean, number one, Wallace didn't wrestle a smart match. You never leave it in the ref's hands. You never, want to say, should he have called stalling? Absolutely, he could. He could probably hit him 2 or 3 times, in my opinion.
At least, yeah.
But at the same time, Wallace, you got to be smarter than that. You're going for your 3rd WPIAL championship. Why are you going? You're going for a throw that you don't need. I understand in the 3rd period you need it. So he's got to look at his plan of attack and understand he's got to wrestle a smart match. I mean, Saquette he's not a bad wrestler, clearly. I mean, the way he's been wrestling.
I don't know if he maybe underestimated him a little bit when he tried that toss in the first, but maybe he thought, I need a takedown, because it was late in the first period when he tried that, and he hadn't gotten a takedown to that point. And Saquette had a great year. I mean, he beat Dom Fundy way back in the Southmoreland tournament, all the way to now where he gets 3 falls to get to the finals. So he's had a great year. He's a very good wrestler. Let's not take anything away from Christian Saquette. But I'm not sure what Wallace was thinking.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Wallace is a guy who came into this ranked number 2 in the state for a reason. Highly touted wrestler who's going to Kent State. He's done it all sort of in his career, especially in the WPIAL. I mean, just really been dominant. So it's very uncharacteristic for Tim Wallace to take this loss to Christian Saquette, who really, up to this point, I mean, hasn't made it to the state tournament before. As you said, he had a big win this year over Dom Fundy, so he's on the map. But probably the biggest surprise of the tournament for me was Tim Wallace going down. Now this happens and they wrestle again. I don't know. Maybe Tim Wallace wrestles a smarter match. I still don't think it's going to be a blowout. Tim Wallace kind of wrestles those matches though. He wrestles Cody Mulligan and gets a big win, and everyone's saying, "Wow, look at that! He beat the returning state champion, by 4 or 5 points." But at the same time, you see him get beat by 4 or 5 points to a guy a lot of people had winning that match.
And now you look at where they are at in the bracket. Josh Stillings of Penridge, number 1. Christian Saquette, number 5, because he has yet to make a state tournament. So he's in the top half with Stillings. Also in the top half is Justin Hart from Hampton. If he wins his first match, he would get Stillings in that second round. Tim Wallace on the bottom half. If he can get to the quarterfinals, he'll likely have Luigi Yates of Cathedral Prep. Max Shaw of Thomas Jefferson. If he wins his first, he'll get Blake Barrick of Big Spring.
So despite finishing second in the Southwest Regional, Tim Wallace could end up in the finals, just based on the way the bracket is laid out. It's not going to be easy. I mean, Seymour in the first round is tough, and then Luigi Yates is a returning state medalist out of Cathedral Prep, battle-tested guy. That's not going to be an easy match. And then I think you look at the top quadrant of the bottom half, you have Blake Barrick, a guy who we've seen many times at the state tournament. You have Jacob Miller from Boyertown. But again, Wallace, I think, is favored against one of those wrestlers. I mean, if he wrestles again like he did against Saquette, probably not.
Okay.
But you look at Saquette and, he's a guy I think could make the semifinals as well, depending on how he wrestles. And if he wrestles like he did against Wallace, he very well could. Or
even Hart.
Or Hart, where he just dominated. I mean, he was, and that's a match that, Hart is a tough freshman. I mean, he really is. I mean, Max Shaw avenged the loss to Hart at the county tournament and beats him. So, you're seeing where Max Shaw is at, but Stillings is the favorite here. I've been wanting to see a Stillings Wallace match for a long time, so I'm hoping it happens. But Stillings he's got to be the favorite.
195 pounds, your champion was Nate Ansell of Connellsville. He ends up winning it over Nathan Mankey of North Hills, and this was an exciting match. It goes to overtime where Ansell wins 8-6, but he had to battle back just to get to that point. Mankey had a big win over Danny Starr of Kiski in the semifinals to get there. Ansell, meanwhile, knocking off the top seed, Shamil Zenaleoff of Chartiers Valley 8-7, and that was another exciting match as well to get to that point. As far as the third-place finisher, Shamil Zenaleoff does end up finishing in third, but he beats Alex Donahue of Indiana 7-5. Donahue knocks off Danny Starr of Kiski 4-2 to get to that third and fourth place match. Now, Starr was a little under the weather, a little bit banged up. He had been sick during the week, but take nothing away, Alex Donahue had a strong showing to get in the top four.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Danny Starr, he obviously didn't look like himself out there.
The whole tournament.
Not the whole tournament. He didn't look like himself at all, which is unfortunate, that happens. But Mankey was very impressed with the way Mankey wrestled. Ansell had some tough matches. Alex Donahue beat 4-0. Then Zenaleoff, he beats him 8-7. Then, of course, in that finals match against Mankey, 8-6 and sudden victory. So Ansell gained a lot of respect in my book because sort of up until this point, a little, he wasn't in the lineup, in some of the big time tournaments like Escape the Rock. So it's tough to gauge where he was at, but really good win for him and good win for Zenaleoff to come back to finish third. But yeah, Mankey, I was impressed with the way he wrestled.
And so gets the number 4 seed in the state bracket. How do you like the WPIAL's draw here in the top 4?
Yeah, I mean, you look at where Ansell falls in the bracket, and I think he's on a favorable side in the sense that he's the regional champion in his side is Nate Stein from Blue Mountain, who's really tough, but is also making his first trip to the Hershey Giant Center. Ansell, on the other hand, has been there before. So I think there's two guys that are really leading the pack, Cole Urbis here and Luke McGonigal from Clearfield. These guys wrestled to a 1-0 decision in the Northwest region. But, yeah, I like where Ansell is. I think he has a good shot to make the semis.
Other guys as well, you have Shamil Zenaleoff on the bottom half, taking on Luke McGonigal in the first round. That's a very tough draw. And Nathan Mankey, who likely could take on Jake Koser in the quarterfinals. Yeah, and I don't see Mankey getting out of that first round match with Spezza. I think Robert Spezza is a guy who we've seen throughout the team tournament for Becca. He's a guy who finishes runner-up at Escape the Rock. Really, really solid wrestler. He actually has a win over Elijah Jones. So that bottom half, it's a draw between Kozar, Crosby, Spezza, and Mankey, I think. 220 pounds for the WPIAL. Eden Edenfield of Laurel Highlands was your champion. 3 falls all within a minute to get to the finals, and then he defeats Jake Slinger of Upper St. Clair 6-3 to win the title. Slinger knocked off the previously undefeated Rocky McGeary of West Allegheny 5-2 to get there. Rocky McGeary struggled, though, coming into the consolations. He ends up dropping a 5-4 decision to Connor Forrest of Hopewell. Forrest ends up finishing in 4th place. He dropped a pair of matches in this tournament to Ogden Atwood of Armstrong, the second of which in the 3rd place match he lost 4-2 in overtime. Yeah, this was a weird weight class because if you would have told me
McGeary was not making the state tournament and Altwood was, I wouldn't have believed you, because I didn't think that was going to happen. But that's why they wrestle him. So Ian Edenfield, though, I mean, he was pretty well rested coming into the finals. He didn't have to spend more than a few minutes on the mat to get to the finals, and then he has Jake Slinger, who he's wrestled before this year. He's defeated him. But Rocky McGeary, he had a win over Slinger. That was one of two of Slinger's losses, was to Edenfield and McGeary. So really good performance by Slinger. And Slinger was in that match with Edenfield. I mean, he
closed the gap a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. So, but down on the consies, I mean, it was crazy that McGeary dropped that consi semifinal match to Forrest, and it's interesting how that pans out, but it's the way it is.
Sometimes you have that quick turnaround first and foremost, that blood round we talked about, but also losing your first match of the season.
Sure,
as well, when you have the thoughts of making the finals in this tournament. So 220 pounds, Ian Edenfield of Laurel Highlands is your top seed.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he has a really strong side of the bracket. So he had an easy time in the WPIAL. Well, they're making up for it here in the PIAA because he's on a very difficult side. Dennis Karras of Exeter Township, a guy who's been ranked as high as 3 in the state. I think he's going to have him in the quarterfinals, and then he's going to have either Nate Schoen or Hunter Katka, in my opinion. Schoen is a freshman, undefeated, 26-0. Katka, he pinned Katka in 57 seconds this year. So, yeah, I mean, you're talking about some high-quality wrestlers here, young wrestlers, a sophomore and a freshman. Hunter Katka is 37-1. That's his only loss. I think he's pinned everybody else he's wrestled. So, I mean, Edenfield's not on the easy side of the bracket here. I'd much rather be on the bottom side, although there is Cole Forrester as well and Greg Bensley, who is a returning state medalist. So Slinger, on the other hand, I think he can make the quarterfinals against Cole Forrester and see what it can do against him. But Forrester's undefeated, 34-0 in the season. Was at the state tournament last year, has wrestled tough there. So, but Edenfield's got a tough road.
285 pounds, Isaac Reed of Kiski was your champion. He defeated Gerald Brown of West Mifflin 3-1. It was a tight match throughout. Ended up being 1-1 up until really close to the end. Gerald Brown made a strong push. Actually drove Reed back, but ended up losing his footing. Reed's able to spin behind and get the takedown for the win. Your third-place finisher was Isaiah Vance of Hempfield. He had a strong tournament after getting pinned by Gerald Brown. He comes back with 4 victories, including a 1-0 win over Derek Devine of North Allegheny to finish in third place.
Yeah, and Isaac Reed, and I heard him say after this match, he said, Gerald's really good. I mean, he is. I mean, there's a reason why these guys are 1 and 2 in the state. Mm-hmm. I mean, Brown finished 4th, and Isaac Reed was 2nd last year. So, I mean, anyone who underestimated Gerald Brown is foolish. Yeah, very foolish, because Brown is really tough. And as you said, he was pushing that action towards the end and kind of slipped. Yeah. And Isaac Reed was able to capitalize on that. So he had some things he needs to work on if he wants to get that state title. But this is a match that could happen again in a week.
Reed comes in as the top seed. And how do you like where those two fall into?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at Reed and where he is, and I think, he's in a good spot. He's on a side where he has a couple guys, Garrett Zobel from LaSalle College, who was a state medalist a few years back, Ryan Cody from North Penn. But he is on the opposite side of Michael Wolfgram and Quan DeBow, both the guys who I think are going to be challenging Gerald Brown for a spot in the finals. So Gerald Brown and Michael Wolfgram, I think they're probably going to see each other in quarterfinals. Wolfgram's 36-0. Tech followed his guy in the finals of the South Central Regional in less than 2 minutes. Came into last year's tournament undefeated, but had some setbacks. So Gerald Brown, on the other hand, came in the state tournament and took complete advantage of it. So, I don't know. Heavyweight, for as much as I rag on the heavyweights, I'm really excited to see the AAA heavyweight and how it pans out.
Yeah, it panned out well for WPIAL last year. Top 4 all in the state.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
But Brown definitely on the tougher path as far as that goes. As far as teams and the wrestlers moving on to Hershey, Kiski area has the most. They have 5 wrestlers going on. Hempfield, they finish with 4 wrestlers moving on, as well as Waynesburg finishing with 4. Teams with 3, Cannon McMillan, the only one with 3. And then from 2, West Allegheny, Shaler, Seneca Valley, Penn Trafford, North Hills, Moon, Hopewell, Latrobe, Franklin Regional, and Bell Vernon. So all the teams with multiple wrestlers going to Hershey. Now let's go ahead and talk about the AA brackets and where the WPIAL guys fall here. You look at Connor Redinger, 106 pounds. He gets the number 3 seed in this one on the bottom half.
Yeah, so he was originally a 2nd seed, but they kind of screwed that up and forgot to give DeMarc his prestige points. So Redinger, though, I think he's on a good side. I think he's in a good place. In fact, I have him in the finals here. So, I think Redinger's in a good spot. And Joey Fisher, he's going to have a tough battle with Bailey Gimber in the first round and potentially Sheldon Seymour if he wins that. So
113 pounds for the WPIAL. Shane Kemper gets the tough draw from Burgestown. He goes right into Bo Bayless if he wins his first one again. That's a tough matchup in the first round. Devin Bloss of Newport. Ian Oswald also on the top half from Burrell in this one.
And if he beats Noah Hunt, he'll likely have Bayless. So not the most favorable draw for the WPIAL up on that top half.
120 pounds, Manny Doveshek of Bentworth. If he gets his first one, he's going to have Isaac Crowell of Fort LaBeouf. Tyler Simmerman of Derry, meanwhile, if he can win his first one against Luke Gong, he's going to have Chase Shields of Bishop McDevitt. Shields may end up wrestling Kenny Dushek of Freedom in that round of 16.
Yeah, so Simmerman's probably got the most favorable draw of all these WPIAL wrestlers here, and I think he can beat Gorg, and then Shields. I mean, if he wrestles him tough, he can beat him, but it's gonna be tight.
126 pounds, Gavin Teasdale looking for his 4th championship. Do you see anyone who's going to knock him off?
I really don't. I mean, even though Gavin Teasdale's coming into the state tournament with 2 losses, and that's 2 more than he did the 3 previous years, I still don't see anyone knocking him off.
Jet Pattison will feed into the Northeast champion if he wins his first match. ZJ Ward of Freedom will feed into Josh Jones of Saucon Valley if he wins his first match. Sean Broadway, though, he'll have Ty Varndell even in the quarterfinals if he can win his first.
Yeah, because he's going to have his hands full in that first round matchup with Jeremy Hanford from Warrior Run, who's a returning state medalist. But Broadway's been wrestling Teasdale tough, so I mean, can we see him wrestle tough the rest of the way?
AJ Corrado at 132 pounds feeds right into Cole Roan of Benton if he can win his first match against Jack Colston of Boiling Springs. Also for the WPIAL, Trent Schulteis. He's going to feed right into Sam Sallet of Harbor Creek. Also, you have Donovan Chambers of Elwood City. He's on the bottom half with Bodie Tolbert of Bishop McDevitt. And then let's not forget Alex Miskovich of Mount Pleasant. He ends up getting the number 4 seed as far as the seeded regions. So he is on the top half of the bracket with Cole Roan of Benton. 138 pounds for the WPIAL. They do not have a wrestler in that weight class, so we'll go right to 145. 145, Joe Demore of Southside. He gets the number 3 seed, so he's on the bottom half with Caleb Hetrick of Brookville to get to the finals. You have Michael Kusick of South Fayette. If he wins his first one, he'll get the top seed. Nate Hobart of Palisades. And then you also have Tyler Griffiths of Southmoreland. He gets the opening match with Hunter Michaels of Reynolds. Yeah,
I mean, you look at some of these matches, and, man, they're going to be tough ones. And Demore, I think, has a really good draw, even though he most likely will get Dorfinger from Slippery Rock. I think that's a winnable match for Demore, obviously, where he's at in the bracket. But Griffiths and Michaels is definitely a match that I'm really looking forward to. That's a returning state runner-up against a guy who's ranked pretty high. And Kusick against McLean, that's another tough matchup because McLean's coming out the 3rd out of a really deep Northwest region. So Kusick's going to have his hands full in that. And if he does win, as you said, likely to get Halbert. So none of these have favorable draws, but I think if anyone, Demore is looking the best.
152 pounds, Corey Christie of Burrell. He is going to be in your top half of the bracket if he can win his first match. He'll get the 4th-seeded region wrestler, Alec English, from Kane. So he's not feeding right into one of the top guys, but Justin McCoy as the top seed from Chestnut Ridge. That puts Thane Lawrence of Fraser on the bottom half of the bracket, where he could see Cade Lynn of Southern Columbia in the quarters, and then Chase Anklam of Penn Argyl in the semis.
Yeah, and I think that's you look at that Lynn-Thane matchup. Those are 2 sophomores going at it, and Thane, I think, comes out on top of that one. But I think he's going to have his hands full with Chase Anklam. In fact, in our earlier podcast, I picked Chase Anklam to make it to the finals. I got to see more out of Thane. So
160 pounds, Sean Gates of Burrow, your only WPIAL wrestler here. He's going to feed into. He'll have Zach Martin of Boiling Springs in the opening round before taking on Jacob Kellenborn of Port Allegheny, who has 1 loss on the season if he can win that match. 170 pounds, Jaden Datz of Southmoreland. If he can win his first match, he's got the tough draw of Edmund Ruth of Susquehanna Township, the top seed. Austin Malee of Burrow, he's got the tough draw out of the opening gates against Carl Harris of Littlestown. Christian Clutter of McGuffey. If he can win his first match, he'll feed into Gavin Henry of Union City. So all guys with tough draws here at this weight.
Yeah, and I think if anybody, Christian Clutter's got more of the favorable draw. I think Gavin Henry's a match that he can win. And as you said, Millie getting Carl Harris is a tough draw. And Dats, as you said, if he would win, he'd go to Edmund Ruth. So tough sliding for the WPIAL here.
182 pounds, John Vargo of Bentworth, the 4th seeded region champion. So he's in the top half of the bracket with Cody Mulligan if he can get to the semifinals. But you have Luke Shingle of McGuffey feeding right into Luca Colstock of Camp Hill. And Jeff Magan's going to have Julian Goring of Fort LaBeouf in the opening round. So a couple of tough draws on the bottom for the WPIAL.
Yeah, big time. And I look at the Magan-Goring match, and I think that's a really, really impressive first-round matchup. That's one I'm going to be definitely watching. But Vargo's in a good spot, I think. I think Vargo has a chance to make some noise here in the top half.
195 pounds, Tyler Stein of Summit Academy. If he can win his first match, he gets Gavin Hoffman of Montoursville. Bryson Miller, meanwhile, he's the 4th-seeded region champ here, and he also on the top half with Hoffman. So a tough sledding for those two guys. But Miller's been great to this point, so I'm interested to see how he does at the state tournament. He's at least got the opportunity to get to that semifinal. And you also have Dalton Lowe of McGuffey. He's on the bottom half. But one win against Jared Miller of Reynolds, a tough wrestler. Then he's going to have Chase Dull of Bermudian Springs. 220 pounds for the WPIAL. They have Dom DeLuca of Derry. He's on the bottom half of the bracket. So he's going to be looking to try to potentially get a rematch with Anthony Walters of Bishop McCourt. He's going to have Hunter Posto of Muncie in the quarterfinals as one of his stepping stones.
Yeah, and Dom DeLuca's got it's a tough draw for him here. I mean, Hunter Poust is only a guy with one loss in his season this year, 40-1, and he could potentially see Landon Fisher again, a guy who he lost to at the state tournament, but then came back and beat him in the regional tournament. Jacob McMaster, though, I think is really the favorite down here on the bottom half. So, and DeLuca would have much rather finished top of the region and been in a better spot.
Yeah, really, the bottom half is loaded. Connor Main of West Green also in the bottom half. If he wins his first, he gets McMaster in the round of 16. 285 pounds. Bishop McCoy of Southside, he is your number 2 seed in this one, so being on the bottom half of the bracket away from Danny Scheib of Tri-Valley. So the win here helps out McCoy quite a bit, as Josiah Jones would have to potentially beat him just to get to the finals. Very
significant win for McCoy because he's on a side that's much more favorable, being away from Danny Scheib and Josiah Jones. So I think Bishop McCoy, I think he's favored to get to the finals, in my opinion.
Yeah, David Schufert of Valley will potentially meet Scheib in the quarterfinals. Cody Vokes of Mount Pleasant, if he wins his first match, he'll get Scheib in the round of 16.
I like that Schufert-Whitehill first round matchup. Schufert's a guy who we've talked about this before. He's battled all these tough guys. He took Josiah Jones to overtime, so he could cause some problems for those guys.
Wrestling starts on Thursday at 9 a.m. for AA, 4 p.m. for AAA, and that's when the wrestling action gets started. PA Power Wrestling is going to be busy all week long. Stay with us. We got rankings. We got podcasts. We're going to have so much for you, and then at the actual tournament, wall-to-wall coverage. We have it for you.
It's going to be tough. It's going to be fun. I mean, yesterday I'm sitting there watching Big Tens on TV, the championship finals. I'm watching the 3rd and 5th place matches on my computer, and then I'll have another computer up where I'm doing rankings. So, I think my fiance walked in the room. She's like, "Are you there's something wrong with you? There's something wrong with you."
Well, we know that.
Well, I said, I was like, "Well, yeah, duh." But she was like, "No, you're obsessed." And I was like, "Yeah."
That's why you are the man you are. You're the man of the year.
No, okay, that was many years ago. But thank you, Greg, for reminding me.
But hey, you know what? We got a lot of stuff going, and make sure you stay with us throughout the entire week. All with Twitter and Facebook and just any place you can follow us here on PA Power Wrestling, because we'll have so much for you. Yep. And make sure you come check us out, say hi, and we got 1 week of wrestling left. Should be fun.
Yeah, that's right. We're looking forward to it.
I want to thank Jack Blumer of Kiski for joining us on the show. Next week, make sure you join us. It's our last episode of the season, and we'll be talking to a lot of WPIAL guys because I think we're going to fare pretty well at the state tournament.
I would say we're going to have a few state champions coming back this way.
And we're going to make sure to talk to as many of them as we can, as we like to each and every year. For my broadcast partner, Jeff Upson, I'm Greg Warnock. Thanks for listening in to War Up on the WPIAL.